This is Conversations with Women in Sales, an award-winning podcast created by Barbara Giamanco, who hosted the first 67 episodes. Listen to interviews with amazing women about their journeys in their sales careers, often discussing sales leadership tips, ideas, and strategies. We aim to inspire women to consider a sales career and for some women to grow into sales leadership. Men, we appreciate your allyship. And now, your host, Lori Richardson.
Big shout out to our official sponsor, Reprise, the leading full funnel, product-led growth platform. With Reprise, your sales team creates, presents, and shares product demos, perfectly customized for each step of your sales motion. Go to getreprise.com/womenInSales to try for free today.
I'm joined today by Porchia Jenkins, and Porchia is a sales development manager at Trick Actions in the Bay Area. Porchia, welcome to Conversations with Women in Sales. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I was looking at your background and it was interesting because you went to Southern Illinois University, right? And what's interesting about you is that you got a master's in kinesiology and exercise science. So I would imagine, and you went on to be a PE teacher, right? Is that what you thought? You were an athlete? And tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So my love for sports led me to a kinesiology degree. My first love was actually basketball. So I was a 3-sport athlete in high school and loved every bit of that. Played intercollegiate sports while I was in college. So not the actual college team, but the one that traveled and did the level below. So we wasn't committed to a team, but definitely committed athletes by heart. And so when I decided to choose a college, I ultimately knew that I wanted to do something that would allow me to stay in that realm of sports. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to become first an athletic trainer so I can be in it with the actual athletes, or if I wanted to actually teach. So I always believed I had amazing coaches. I had great teachers, but I never really put two and two together. I could be a phys ed teacher to help bridge the gap between the two things. So I decided to be a teacher. And so when I went for my undergrad, my undergrad was in education and coaching. And so I decided after I graduated that, hey, there's more to this than just teaching. I ultimately want to retire having my own recreational business that's going to focus on youth sports and wellness. So I continued on right after getting my bachelor's, had a grad assistantship where I was able to teach adults before I actually taught children for 2 years, which was a really great experience, and ultimately started my education journey as an educator.
That is excellent. We need good teachers out there. So I appreciate that. I'm a former teacher. I think I mentioned to you in our note. And yet I couldn't support my family on the salary.
Yeah.
So I ultimately left to go into sales. But what triggered you into a sales shift? Because that's interesting.
Yeah, very similar. I think that being a teacher is definitely one of those noble professions where you're impacting the lives of other people, but financially it's not what it pays in what you give. And essentially having that experience for 8 years in a K through 12 setting, it was one of those crossroads when COVID hit to be able to say, listen, do you want to stay in this environment that's really not already giving you what you need and want? I live in California, so that's a very costly state and to be living on a teacher's salary in one of the highest cost states there is for cost of living. I had to make a decision on top of we have a global pandemic happening. I was lucky enough to have friends who worked in tech. So I had been around it quite a bit. So I had already had the holiday parties, going to some of the events and those kinds of things. And that intrigued me, all the glitzy things that we hear about, and experiencing that and just learning a little bit more about them. So having that exposure early on really gave me okay, you can do this. What does it really take to become what is it again? A BDR? Oh, okay. I'm going to go be a BDR and figure out how to do that. But the teacher in me, honestly, Lori, wouldn't let me do that, just randomly apply to jobs. I had to prepare myself. I wanted to be prepared. I want to be the best BDR, teacher transition person that you would interview. So I did a tech boot camp for about 6 months, sorry. And that's how I got my first actual job at Gauntlet, through that partnership, but also the preparation I did with that company helped me really make the leap from education to tech.
Oh, that's so interesting. And what were some of the things you learned about being a BDR that might help somebody listening today that maybe is going to apply to be what an SDR or BDR?
Yeah, I think the key to being a really good BDR is really having that curiosity. Obviously, you want the foundational skills of cold calling because that is a huge part of what most companies are asking BDRs to do, and also have the ability to craft emails. But I also think the person who is naturally curious and can actually have good conversations with people and be an active listener are things that will help you stand out and be a exceptional BDR, right? You can be a good BDR with all those other skills, but what makes you an exceptional BDR is that curiosity piece, and you're just being able to have conversations. No matter what the persona is, it's just you being able to actively listen and know your product very well and tie that back to a problem that you actually can solve is going to be what helps you to be a exceptional BDR, in my opinion.
And did you see yourself as a leader as you were getting more and more experience?
Yeah, so I knew early on what I wanted to do, but at the same time, I understood there are levels and steps that you have to take in order to get there. Like most of my time in education, like to become the next level, you have to work toward that, right? So that was how I was going into it. Even though I'm leaving an entire career where I was tenured, I knew that an entry level role was going to be my opportunity to be able to build myself up into the leader that I wanted to be. So I really took that as an opportunity to be not only a product expert, but really get good at the job. Because eventually, if I do want to lead people, I do want to have that lens to understand like the highs and the lows of the job, but also have gone through it, but also knowing solutions that are actually going to be meaningful. Because it's nothing worse than talking to someone who doesn't really understand that grind, but also a realistic solution to the problem that you're having each and every day. And some of it is not the skill set, it's the emotional piece that not a lot of people talk about. And so I think having that experience and knowing what I wanted and how important that this BDR role was going to be in that leveling up really ultimately helped me get where I am right now.
And that emotional piece, that kind of ties into mindset, and that comes from what you learn in sports. Did that?
Yeah.
And also probably in teaching. You work with high school kids, right?
Oh yeah. I
Like
would
Abbott
laugh.
Elementary.
Literally love that show, by the way.
Yeah.
It was so funny, like my first interviewing days, like trying to get a tech job. And before then, like right now, teachers are given much more of a shot than they did 3 years ago. I'm going to be honest. It was literally me convincing them that I was ready to transition to tech. And they would always often ask us, like, how do you see education playing a role in tech? What are your transferable skills? And I go, have you ever taught a kindergartner? Have you ever taught them to sit down and be patient and listen and stay in line and try to learn something? I'm like, it's very, very similar to talking cold calling, right? I'm trying to convince someone to listen to me, and I have to do that for 55 people in 45 minutes. Talk about pressure, right? And so often when I do this, so when I would tell them that story, they're like, you could just see the light bulb turn on. Like, oh yeah, that is kind of hard. That is very tough. But also the different stakeholders that I would have to deal with, right? I have in education 5 periods with 55 different people with different learning styles, different activities that I have to manage. Like this is it's controlled chaos essentially from time to time. And to go into a space where I have a list, a book of business, and I can go talk to these people and find targeted messaging, I felt like that was just perfect for what I'd already been doing, essentially.
Yeah, it's too bad that education has lost people like us, because I know we impacted that. I know you did, and I'm pretty sure I did in my own way with the little folks I worked with.
Absolutely.
But such a tough, that was the toughest job I ever did. That it was mental, emotional, physical. It just got everything. And it was poor. It was not well respected. And that's what I see with teaching today too. And that's a whole nother episode probably sometime. But I really hope that we can help impact the teaching profession in a positive way down the road, but because that's a tough one. So I've talked about teachers being good in sales for years. And you're right. People were like, really? And now that they've seen some really great examples, I think people are coming around that it's okay to be unconventional in the pursuit, and sales hiring has changed a lot. So that's a positive I see. And so you notice it was very much a male majority world, a white male majority world, I might add. And how has that been for you in different roles that you've had?
It is very challenging, I believe, I think, and I know I feel. But one of the things that I've always had to deal with, honestly, throughout, even as early as sports, I can remember being picked for a traveling club team. I was the only Black person. on the team. Or when I went to college, there was only 27% African Americans, Black in my college. Going into the kinesiology field where it is very much so white and male dominated, right? I'm the only woman or I'm the only Black person in any of my classes. So honestly, I've been conditioned, and that's not necessarily a good thing, but to be the only in most cases, right? And so early on, I figured out really quickly, like, no matter what I wanted to do, like I had to believe in myself to show up and not feel uncomfortable or if I didn't belong, right? And I think I decided a long time ago that I wasn't going to let that stop me. And so same thing with this transition to tech is you're going into a very male dominant space that is going to be majority white. Like, how are you going to show up like I do any other place in my life? Like a person who is capable and someone who is smart enough to do this job. And yes, there may be biases, but you know what? Show them with numbers, show them with your work ethic, show them that you are, for one, belong, but also that you are capable and you will do a good job no matter what. And so as I made that transition to tech, that was my attitude about it. It was just like, hey, I'm not at all out of place. I do not feel any out of sorts. And it took a lot of years of, like I said, confidence building for myself because of doing my own experiences to do that. And not everybody has that experience. And not everybody takes that path. And it was very hard early on. So I think my stumble blocks came earlier in my life dealing with it. So when it came time for corporate America's existence of it, it was more or less, I know what I have to do. I've prepared for this.
Wow, that's amazing. That is so awesome what you just said. For me, I can only speak from being a woman. I was a single mom and I got into this all male world, and I knew I was capable because I grew up in a family run business, and my grandmother was, she was a business owner and she sold. I learned how to sell watching her. But what got me was just that the guys always talking about this or dating or their tough weekend on dates. Just this like singular, no one looking around. Hey, does this even interest you? Now, but the conversations and the golf outings and the cigar bars and, there were years and years of that. And so I understand for some women, it just doesn't feel like the environment they want to be in. But I'm here to stay, and I think you are too, is that it's the opportunity it's your own business. You take, as a leader or as an individual contributor, you have a piece of that business as your own little fiefdom. And it doesn't really matter what those guys are doing. The ones that are practicing their golf swing and the fake grass in the office, that's what I used to see. I would come in, get my work done, get the out. Now in a hybrid world, it would be even different. I didn't have that option. And I don't know, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I sometimes think about it as, and I actually talk about this with my reps, sometimes you have to swim your own lane, right? You can't be overly concerned of what is happening around you. And you also attach yourself to people that make you feel like you can ultimately be yourself, no matter what is happening. And I think that also counts for companies as well. Like, I want to be at a company where I don't feel like I'm out of sorts or I'm this unicorn or I'm this anomaly. I want to be able to work at a place in a space where I can show up each and every day. We can talk about golf if I'm interested, but we can also not talk about golf, and we can just be okay with being normal human beings that had a boring weekend. Like, whatever the case may be. And I think those are the things that are really important nowadays when you think about a space that you want to spend 40 plus hours at, whether it's hybrid or remote. Like, you're spending a lot of time with these people. And if you don't feel comfortable or you don't feel like you can actually be yourself, that probably isn't the space for you. And I think that's the choice that we have now more than any other time in our lives, any other careers that we've ever had. Like, we have way more choice in a lot of those things now. Even with all the layoffs and stuff happening, there's still so many opportunities for us to pick companies that will treat us the way that we should.
So many opportunities. Absolutely. And I love sports because having family members in collegiate and professional roles, I learned so much. And yet I learned also that a lot of women don't like sports and don't really want to talk about it. I like it when people can find something in common with whatever the subject. If someone was talking about another topic that I'm not, like Greek history, I might find one thing about it that I could bring up and be interesting about. And I think that's
exactly.
People are like, oh, I don't want to hear about sports. It's like, let's find some common ground. And that can be a really good thing. No one wants to hear me go on and on about ice hockey. I know that, but it's, so you have to find ways to connect with people, right? And no matter what the topic is. So
I think, and as a salesperson, that's what we do, right? Like, essentially, you have to do that with your colleagues, like, and people that you don't know. Like, you go into we go to these conferences, you don't know any of these people. And all of a sudden, you're like sitting at a table, so we're just going to be silent, or we're just going to try to spark up a conversation about finding some commonality. And my favorite question for that is, oh, tell me more about that, especially if I don't know anything about it. Oh, tell me more about that. Oh, okay, that's very interesting. I didn't know anything about it. And I'm honest about when I don't know something about things. I'm like, you
And
know
it
what?
doesn't
That's
take
news to
anything
me.
away from you to say that either. It's great to be interested in other people. And we met,
Exactly.
speaking of conferences, you and I met at the Girls Club event. And that was
Yeah.
quite the event. Can you tell us a little bit about Girls Club so we can give a shout out to them?
Oh, please, let's do that. Oh, my heart just started to flutter. So Girls Club is an amazing organization that we took part in for Rise Up conference, where that was my pivotal moment in my BDR world, where I was like, I really want to be an exceptional leader, but I know that there has to be a network of women like myself who are aspiring to be leaders, that we can network together, but also figure out those little nuances that we have experienced as women. And so I found Girls Club. And so I took part in the Gen 4 protege cohort. And it was by far probably the most transformative experience that I've had. Again, like that teacher in me wanting to be the best and understand this world. Like, I did. I was the protege of the year for Gen 4. So I was very proud and very honored for that recognition from the organization, but also from my peers. And just really, I was sharing with one of my colleagues, like, that was the first time in my adult working experience where I felt in a room full of women, genuine, authentic, like, encouragement, like, well wishes. And it was like such a overwhelming feeling. I had to like catch my breath a couple times. And for me, every woman should be able to have a highlight moment in their career where they go into any room, especially a room full of us, and feel like there's nothing but genuine love and admiration for them, and trust and confidence that they're going to be successful. And it really just sparked something in me that I felt like Girls Club is here for a reason, but also has come here to change our lives. And I'm indebted and forever will be a part of this community and make sure I can do what I can to help give back to them as well.
Wow, that's awesome. And I agree. Girls Club is an incredible place. I serve as, I don't know, an advisor. I'll catch up with Lauren Bailey. I'm usually in a Whole Foods store when we talk, which is, she mentioned that on the stage. And it's true. I don't know why, but for some reason it happens. And it's an incredible community. And it goes against the myth that women can't support each other. Women support each other all the time. And it just goes to the fact that I think people don't always want to see it, because if we all get together and work together, we can do some really big things. And so I'm really excited for what the future holds for Girls Club and all the different women in sales organizations that are out there. So
I agree. I think it's a great opportunity, and it's a great example of what happens when we are brought all together, right? And we have this opportunity to learn and grow from each other from an authentic perspective, right? We don't need the things that are just fluff. Like, let's really get down to the brass tacks here, the things that actually impact us in our day-to-days. And how do we learn and grow from each other from it? Because you don't get that opportunity to be that kind of vulnerable while you're at work with your bosses in the experience. So it was really great to have that experience with everyone.
And it's not a complaint set. It's just, here's a situation. I'm working to get here. Anybody having ideas? And then listening to all the speakers. And yeah, I mean, you had a 6-month program, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think some highlights of it's like, it's not complaining, it's naming it to tame it, right? Lauren talks about that. And it's important to ultimately not fester in a lot of the things that exist. And then it's not just us. I just think this is just a platform and an organization and community for us to talk about it that is not therapy, because I'm sure we all probably have these conversations with therapists. Oh, therapy here, people. So I'm just going to be honest with you there. But I think for me, from a professional standpoint, what I really loved about Girls Club is the things that I was learning week to week over week were things that I was actually using in my current role. Negotiation, like having to have tough conversations. So it wasn't just things that were like just served up to me as maybe these are things you're dealing with. These are things I was actually dealing with, that I was actually able to solve while going through the program and all those kinds of things. So to me, I think that's very important. If you haven't joined or haven't had a community like Girls Club, they are accepting applications for Generation 5 right now.
That's right.
100% encourage. I 100% encourage you. If you're thinking about leadership, take part in this organization in this community, because it definitely gives back. and it'll allow you to really learn and grow as a leader if you haven't been thinking about anything.
ERgirlsclub.com is, and I'll put it in the notes for people. I can't say enough great things about it because so many women get promoted after they go through the program, and they just, you just feel more confident. You feel like, hey, I did have the right answers. I know a thing or two because these other people have confirmed it. And we've seen people being brutally honest and transparent in the actual conference where people are real. And that's what I love about it. Okay. That's a really good commercial for Girls Club. And how about for you? What tips do you have for women that might be looking to get into maybe an SDR, BDR, or maybe a leadership role?
Yeah, I think that it's important to believe in yourself. I think what ifs are worse than actually trying and failing. And failures are teachable moments, right? You actually get told no, so you know exactly what you need to work on, and the thing that may not work for one company may be a gold mine for somebody else, right? So having the opportunity to be confident enough to take a shot, but also be prepared. Like, it's okay to be risky and just jump in with both feet, but also make sure you come with substance and you have value, and you know that whatever you've been doing can not necessarily easily transfer, but you can articulate how it translates, right? Or how it's transferable. I think that's important. And also join organizations where you get to learn from other people. This is definitely a new world, but when it comes to even the leadership standpoint, leave yourself with good leaders, both male and female. But I think what it does feel good to is sometimes see yourself in the community of people that you are working with and or learning from. And I think that ultimately anybody who wants to either be a BDR, be curious, be willing to dig deep, really invest in yourself, essentially. And as a leader, the same thing. Choose to be the leader that is striving for more, but also really trying to learn and be invested in being a good leader as well.
And how about in choosing a company? It's been apparent, some of the statistics that we've seen lately, that people want to work for companies that share their values, that are transparent about their values. And also, I know for women, we want more professional development options. We want to know what that's about. What about when you were looking at different jobs? What came up for you?
Yeah, I think that's super important. It's not only aligning with what they're saying and what you visually see on their information page. It's like when you're talking to people and you're interviewing, you are also interviewing them, right? You want to have actual conversations with real people, not with what is branded on any of their websites. And I think that's important to ask those questions that are really important to you. And it can be like, what is culture like? That's a very broad question. Like, I think it's, as you go through your interview stages, you get to meet different people at the company. You get to actually engage with people who are doing the work in the day-to-day space. Ask them real human questions, like what made you choose the company and what makes you stay? Like, why have you stayed this long? Ask those things, because that'll be really telling to what is important, but also what's important to them and the people that you're going to work with, right? But do your research. I think that's also super important, but also be smart about the research that you do, because people can leave bad reviews, and you think about all the good places you've ever been. You probably have never left a review. You just go back again and again because you don't want people to know about the great spot. But people who have had bad experience are going to leave the bad reviews because, you know, how our world is nowadays. So just be cognizant of that, or just do your research and really listen to your gut when you're talking to people and when you're going through your experience, when you're trying to choose your next company.
Yeah, that's really good advice. What do you think were your most transferable skills from being a teacher and an athlete?
Oh, from the teaching side of it, I think my ability to pivot quickly, like it literally, you didn't know what you were getting into each and every day. You can come into a gym and you would have a whole lesson plan and there would be a scaffold in the middle of the floor. You have to like now pivot your entire day. So it taught me to think quick on my feet quite often. Not every person, every student is the same. So you have to meet people where they're at, have to be innovative in how you're choosing to communicate, teach, and also how to inspire people. Because I think, you know, who we are as individuals are not the same as the folks we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So you can't always meet them where you are. You have to meet them where they are. And I think teaching taught me that. From a coaching perspective, like hard work, dedication, I'm never late for anything. If I am, something's wrong. Because from a coaching perspective, I had a coach that basically told me early is on time and late is unacceptable. So it's very much so rooted in my life. And so I show up like that. I want to show up. And I think that is also how it shows up in my day-to-day life. I'm curious. I still want to continue to learn. I'm looking at the side of my desk right now. I have 6 books that I want to read. and I bought, and I'm going to read them hopefully before the new year because that's my goal for myself. Still set goals for myself. I have targets I have to work for, but I also have personal goals that I continue to strive for to be a better person. And I think a lot of that comes from me just being an athlete and a coach. And that's what I also inspire my reps to do is just stay curious, find better ways to grow and develop, but own your growth. Like my company has definitely built in things and every company does, but I want to own my growth and be able to steer it versus somebody steering it for me.
That's really important because a lot of people wait for their manager to tell them what their next move is. And I know for me, and I've said this a number of times before, is that I had 23 sales managers in my career, and some were great, but some were not good. And you can't just leave it to someone to tell you when, you should be ready to move on or move up or do something different. And I used to hold my own sales contests with myself or with a few people around me. Things weren't happening from the manager's level. I just did it myself. You got to do what it takes to keep you enthusiastic and excited and interested.
I agree. And it has to be something that comes from within. We often talk about extrinsic motivators, so why people are in sales, but there has to be some intrinsic motivation that happens to keep you showing up each and every day. This is a hard space. It's not the easiest job to do. And a lot of the things that keep people like us going is our intrinsic motivation for ourselves to be the leaders, where there's financial gain or all those things. And I think that's important to really understand what that is for yourself and really tap into that to keep you motivated, even when things around you don't seem like it's motivating or anybody is giving you any pointers or choices to do anything.
Yeah, that's great. Last question. Any ideas on getting more Black and brown people, and I would say particularly women, because that's really my push into B2B sales?
Yeah, I think it's important. Representation matters. And that's the starting point for really attracting good talent, but Black and brown talent specifically, is because when we look at boards, leadership, and do I fit any of these looks? That's the first thing. And then also, I think I would challenge more women of color to really sometimes just take a bet on yourself. Go into these companies, do a really good job and be comfortable sometimes with starting out as maybe the only, but also knowing that you can come in and do a really good job and continue to push yourself to be in that position now where you can lift as you climb. And I think that's important to do. Or when you have a seat at the table, be a voice, be someone who can actually speak up and not just we need more people. It's like sometimes people they have biases that they don't realize, not in an ill-intentional way. Like sometimes it takes you to have a conversation with someone to really change their perspective and understand there needs to be a more intentional push for this. And this is why, not because we want to meet a metric, but because it's important. Because in order for our teams to have even diverse thinkers, we need people who look different. We need people who think differently, right? And from the side of a woman's perspective and even the side of having someone that is Black or brown on your team, like those things matter for people to really grow in this space. And I think ultimately the representation and having people in leadership also a huge driver for that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's such systemic issues behind all of that it's not just that we need to try harder. It's not, we can only do so much. The men in the system have to support us and be our allies. And we're seeing a lot more men do that now. It's really fantastic. So
I agree.
We can't just talk among ourselves, right? We have to get the guys to make some changes and to make some moves. And we appreciate that. At least I know I do. So
same.
Yeah, that's great. I'm so excited for you and your future. I loved having you here, Porchia. Porchia is Sales Development Manager at Trip Actions and big advocate for Girls Club. And Porchia, continued success. And we will look for you in the future and doing interesting things. And you're welcome to come back anytime.
I appreciate it, Laura. It was really great talking to you. Thanks for letting me have a time with
you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Conversations with Women in Sales. You can find all of our episodes at womensalespros.com/podcast. Help us spread the word and let's change the face of B2B sales.